The scent of sweet magnolias still seemed to linger on my skin as we crossed the threshold of the house on Trad Street. It wasn't a mansion, but for us, for our future, it was perfect. A spacious historic duplex right in the heart of downtown Charleston, South Carolina. Sunlight poured in through the tall windows and the faint sound of a street musician drifted in from the distance. Carter squeezed my hand, his brand-new gold wedding band brushing against mine. "Welcome home, Madison," he whispered. His smile was my entire universe. But that illusion lasted exactly as long as it took us to walk up the stairs to the second floor. Where there should have been a closed door at the end of the hallway, there was now a massive, newly torn-open archway. The sharp, piercing screech of a power drill hit us instantly. My wedding dress, still carefully zipped inside its garment bag over my arm, seemed to whisper a warning. The scene stopped me dead in my track. The two main bedrooms, the ones that overlooked the small courtyard filled with the geraniums I had fallen in love with, no longer existed. In their place was a massive hollowed-out space, choked with drywall dust and exposed wiring. Standing right in the center like a queen inspecting her newly conquered realm was Chloe, my sister-in-law. She was wearing cut-off denim shorts and a paint-splattered tank top, aggressively pointing at a wall where two contractors were framing out what looked like a gigantic walk-in closet. "A little more to the right. Are you guys blind? My walk-in needs to start exactly here," she yelled over the noise. Carter froze beside me. I felt his hand, the one holding mine, tense up so hard that his knuckles turned white. He didn't say a word. He just stared. "Chloe," I managed to get out, though my voice sounded weak, drowned out by the buzzing drill. She turned around. There was no surprise on her face. Instead, she wore a look of blatant, unapologetic triumph. "Oh, finally, hey, newlyweds. What do you think I decided those two tiny rooms were a total waste of space? This way I'll actually have a decent master bedroom and a closet. Mom says I can use Grandma's antique armoire for the back wall." "What you decided," I repeated, looking up at Carter. He couldn't take his eyes off the rubble. "Chloe, these were going to be our bedrooms. The master and the guest room." "Oh, whatever." She waved her hand dismissively like she was swatting away a fly. "You guys can just use the downstairs bedroom that faces the back alley. It's way more intimate. Besides, Dad says Carter is barely ever home anyway. And Madison, I'm sure you don't mind. You're always so practical." I felt a hot flush of anger rush to my face. Practical. That was the exact word my mother-in-law Eleanor had used to label me since the day we met. It was her way of describing my lack of drama and my tendency to resolve things quietly. Coming from her mouth, it was never a compliment. "And who authorized this?" Carter's voice was low, but it had an edge of cold steel to it that I had never heard before. This wasn't the voice of my smiling groom. It wasn't the voice of the patient engineer. This was someone else, entirely. Chloe blinked momentarily, thrown off by his tone, but she recovered instantly. "Authorized? I don't need to authorize anything, Carter. It's the family house." "It is my house," he corrected, clipping every syllable perfectly. Just then, footsteps echoed on the staircase. Arthur and Eleanor, my in-laws, appeared. He had the smug look of a satisfied patriarch. She wore her signature smile, the one that said she owned everything she walked on. They were carrying a bottle of expensive champagne and 3 flutes. "There you are. We thought you got lost on your own honeymoon," Arthur joked, rubbing his hands together. His eyes swept over the chaotic, demolished room with obvious pride. "Looking good, Chloe. The contractors seem efficient." Carter let go of my hand and took a step forward. "Dad, Mom, can you explain to me what is going on here?" Eleanor rolled her eyes, her absolute favorite expression. "Oh, Carter, please don't start a drama on your first day back. Chloe just needed more space. She's a young woman with a social life. 2 separate little rooms made no sense. Now she's going to have a gorgeous suite. It's exactly what she needed." Carter shook his head slowly as if his brain couldn't process the words. "This is Madison's and my house. Our home. How could you possibly come in and change the structural layout without even asking us?" Arthur furrowed his brow. The joking demeanor vanished from his face. "Your house, son, don't be ungrateful. This property has been in the family for years. It's the family estate. Chloe is just as much a part of this family as you are. More even, he added, shooting me a quick, icy glare. She has always lived here. I bought it, Carter said. His voice lost its edge. It went flat cold as a tombstone. I bought it with the money from my biological mother's inheritance. It was put in my name 6 months ago. You all live here because I allow it. And now, without consulting me, you let Chloe tear down walls. The silence in the room became so heavy you could cut it with a knife. Chloe's jaw dropped. Eleanor turned pale. Arthur puffed out his chest, standing taller. Are you serious right now, son? Are you really throwing it in our faces that we live under your roof after everything we've done for you? Arthur's voice boomed through the empty, gutted room. Chloe is your sister. Blood is thicker than water, and it's certainly thicker than any legal deed. She is staying right here, do you understand? This will be her home for as long as she wants, and nobody is going to kick her out. Eleanor walked over to her daughter, wrapping a protective, defiant arm around her. That's right, Carter. Your sister needs stability, and this is her home. We are not going to let anyone. She paused, and this time her venom-filled gaze locked directly onto me. Make her feel less than welcome. If your wife doesn't like it, she can get used to it, or she can find somewhere else to be comfortable. The poisoned words hung in the dusty air, waiting for a reaction. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. I looked at Carter, waiting for his anger. Waiting for him to defend me, waiting for the logical explosion after such an unbelievable insult directed at me, at us. And then my husband did something completely unexpected. He smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It wasn't a knowing smirk. It was a strange, calm, almost pitying smile. A smile that didn't reach his eyes, which remained as cold and distant as marble. He looked at me, completely ignoring his family who were watching us expectantly, so sure of their victory, so sure of our submission. Without saying a single word, he reached his hand out to me. Not with the urgency of a stressed groom, but with the calm determination of a captain making an irreversible decision. I took his hand. My fingers were freezing. His were firm and warm. Enjoy the renovations, Carter said. His voice was so serene it was actually terrifying. His gaze swept over his father, his mother, and his sister, whose face was starting to show the first hints of confusion. We'll see you on Sunday for family dinner. Like every week. Don't be late. And then, turning me around gently but firmly, he guided me back toward the stairs. We walked down in total silence, retracing the steps we had climbed just minutes before, full of excitement. I could hear the murmurs of disbelief we left behind in our wake. Wait, where are you going? Eleanor gasped. I heard Chloe's nervous little laugh. We walked right out the front door and back onto Trad Street. The afternoon sun bathed Charleston in gold. The air smelled of coffee, of the ocean breeze of life. Carter didn't slow down. We walked 1 block, then another. My mind was a hurricane of humiliation, rage, and absolute confusion. Carter, I mumbled when I couldn't take it anymore. Where are we going? What was that? Are we really not going to say anything? Not going to do anything? He finally stopped under the awning of a closed boutique. He cupped my face in his hands and looked deep into my eyes. The coldness was gone. In its place was a deep, unbreakable determination. And something else, something that looked like liberation. Madison, my love. My wife, he said, every word sounding like an oath. You don't argue with people who steal your home. You change the locks. But first, you walk away with your dignity. But where are we going? I repeated, feeling tears of fury and disappointment burning my eyes. Right then, the phone rang inside his backpack, the one he had carried with our honeymoon essentials. He pulled it out, looked at the screen, and that strange smile returned to his lips. It was the smile of someone who had just received confirmation of a flawless master plan. To our home, he replied, turning the screen to show me. It was a booking confirmation from an app, a long-term rental for an apartment right in the center of the French Quarter. I rented it by the month 3 weeks ago, just in case. He kissed my forehead. Don't cry, beautiful. They haven't won a thing. They just signed their own death warrant. Grabbing my hand again, we disappeared into the maze of historic cobblestone alleys, leaving behind the house, the drill, and the echo of words that could never be taken back. Nobody is going to kick her out. He hadn't taken the words back. He had left them hanging in the toxic air like a trap they had set for themselves. And as I followed him, trusting that terrifying calm in his eyes, I couldn't help but shiver despite the warm southern afternoon. What death warrant? The apartment was on Queen Street, barely a 10-minute walk from the family house, but it might as well have been on another planet. It was small, flooded with natural light, furnished with functional IKEA pieces, and had a window that opened up to a courtyard where kids were playing basketball. It didn't smell like old money or southern magnolias. It smelled like fresh coffee and floor cleaner. It smelled new. It smelled like us. Like mine. Carter dropped the backpack on the hardwood floor and turned to face me. His calm demeanor was hypnotic, but now that we were alone, I saw the first crack. A barely noticeable tremor in his hands and a profound sadness in his eyes that his smile couldn't hide. 3 weeks. That was the first thing I managed to say, leaning heavily against the back of a light wooden chair. You've been renting this for 3 weeks. Just in case. He ran a hand through his hair, and for the first time since we walked out of that hellscape, he looked exhausted. Since the day I told them we were moving into the Trad Street house after the wedding, I saw the way my dad said, "That's great, we can all stay together." I saw the triumphant look in my mother's eyes. I saw it coming, Madison. I saw it coming and I prepared for it. I'm sorry. I should have warned you. The anger I had been holding back with tooth and nail finally exploded. It wasn't a scream. It was something deeper, heavier. Warn me, Carter, I was just humiliated. Your mother looked at me like I was a squatter. Your dad practically said blood is thicker than anything, and Chloe literally hijacked our home and you just smiled and walked away. Why didn't you put them in their place? It's your house. Because it wouldn't have done any good, he said, his voice firm. He walked over and gently took my hands, which were balled up into tight fists. Arguing with them on their turf right when they were feeling successful would have only given them ammunition. They would have made my mother cry. My dad would have given a speech about family honor. Chloe would have played the victim. And then what? We would have stayed there in some tiny back room begging for basic respect. No. He gently pushed me to sit on the sofa, then knelt on the floor in front of me. Listen to me, Madison. I need you to listen very carefully. I haven't told you everything about the house. What else? I sighed, feeling completely drained. The house on Trad Street does not belong to the family, he said, slowly measuring every syllable. It is mine. Mine alone. In my name. I bought it in October of last year. I know. With your biological mother's inheritance. I bought it with a portion of my mother's inheritance, he corrected. But that isn't the issue. The issue is that when I bought it, my father wanted us to put it in a family trust, under everyone's name, to simplify things, he said, to make it a family asset. I refused. He got incredibly angry. He accused me of not trusting my own family. My stepmother, Eleanor, cried. She said my dad was the one who always managed the properties and that it was for the best. A cold knot formed in my stomach. So, I went to a title company by myself. I had a clear, clean property deed drawn up, with my name and only my name. Then, I hired a real estate attorney who specializes in property disputes and family law. A dry, no-nonsense guy named David Sterling. I have all the paperwork, Madison. The deed of sale. The wire transfers from my personal bank account where my inheritance sat. The property taxes paid under my name. Everything. And I have witnesses. The notary. The lawyer. The information was dropping like pieces of a twisted, dark puzzle. They know this, Carter continued. They know I paid for it. They know I bought it. But they just assumed, like they always do, that eventually I would cave. That the house would become everyone's property. That family pressure and tradition would break me. They've done it my whole life. With my major in college, with my career, with my personal life. His voice cracked for a second. Even with you. Do you remember when Eleanor tried to convince me to delay the wedding, to wait and see if you were the right fit? I remembered. A casual conversation where Eleanor had randomly started listing the amazing virtues of her country club friends' daughters. Yeah, exactly, he nodded. They always do this. But not this time. Because this time I have you. And because he pointed at the walls of the small apartment. This is our safe space. And that house on Trad Street, that is a battlefield. And today I decided we weren't going to fight a battle where the enemy held all the high ground. So we retreated, but retreated to what my confusion was finally mixing with a tiny sliver of hope. To this apartment. Carter, we can't live here forever. And they are over there destroying your house. We aren't staying here forever. We are here to prepare the counterattack. He stood up, walked over to his backpack and pulled out a thick, heavy-duty binder. He dropped it onto the coffee table with a loud thud. This is the plan. He opened the binder. Inside were stacks of legal documents covered in official stamps, blueprints of the house, and a handwritten list. Step 1, strategic retreat. Completed. Step 2, secure our legal and financial position. Done. Step 3, gather intelligence. Specifically intelligence on my dad's management of the family business and on the household expenses I've been paying for, thinking I was just contributing to the family but realizing I was actually bankrolling Chloe's lifestyle. The power, the water, the HOA fees, the mortgage, all of it comes out of my account. I have the bank statements for the last 2 years. Step 4, establish contact with allies. He looked at me, and for the first time I saw a flash of something that wasn't sadness or anger. It was pure, unfiltered strategy. Allies. Who in your family would ever be our ally? My Uncle Harvey Carter said. A genuine, albeit bitter smile crossed his lips. My dad's brother, the one who was pushed out of Southern Heritage Logistics 15 years ago because he lacked vision. The one who lives in a modest house in North Charleston and gets nothing but crumbs at the family reunions. Harvey hates my father, and Harvey knows things. My world was spinning. This was no longer a family squabble. This was a Cold War. Carter, this is massive. What are you going to do? Sue them? Evict them? It'll be a massive scandal. They already created the scandal, Madison. His voice was smooth and dangerous again. By invading our home, by disrespecting you like that, by assuming their entitlement overruled our rights, my rights, they broke the rules. No, I don't want a lawsuit. I want unconditional surrender. He sat next to me and tapped the list. Tomorrow, David, my lawyer is going to send a certified cease and desist letter to my father. A formal legal notification that they have altered private property without the owner's consent. They will be given a deadline. Let's say 72 hours to present a restitution plan, meaning a plan to return the house to its exact original floor plan. But that will cost a fortune. They'll never. Exactly. They will never do it. They don't have the cash on hand, and even if they did, their pride wouldn't let them. It will be their first documented refusal, and it will be our first piece of hard evidence. His eyes were shining now. Meanwhile, we stay right here, calm and quiet. This Sunday, we are going to family dinner. What? I jumped up from the couch. After what happened today, not a chance in hell, Carter. I am not sitting at a table with them, acting like nothing happened. Not acting like nothing happened, my love, he said, standing up and gently grabbing my shoulders. We will go as the offended party. The victims. But victims who are trying to show good faith. We will go to listen, to see what they say, to let them expose themselves. We'll wait for my dad, drunk on wine and ego, to drop a gem of a quote. We'll wait for my stepmom to pull me aside and beg me to be reasonable. We are going to gather more intel, and once we leave with their fresh refusal in our back pocket, we initiate Step 5. The air in the small living room felt electrified. What is Step 5? I asked, practically breathless. Carter walked over to the window, looking out at the orange Charleston sunset. Step 5 is an ultimatum. Not about the house, about the family business. He turned to face me. My dad is the CEO, but he isn't the sole owner. My Uncle Harvey owns 20%. And there are a couple of cousins with minor shares. My dad has been siphoning corporate funds to pay for his personal lifestyle for years. Small amounts, but constant. Vacations to the Maldives. Chloe's new car. Renovations for the beach house. Harvey knows. And Harvey has proof. Proof that if made public wouldn't just put my dad in the crosshairs of the IRS, but would get him stripped of his role as CEO. I collapsed back onto the couch. Oh my God. Carter, are you talking about destroying your own family? No, he said. His voice was cold as steel. They are already destroyed. By their own greed, their selfishness, and their absolute disdain for anyone who isn't them. I am just pulling back the curtain so everyone can see it. So my stepmother, who always looks the other way, has to see it. So Chloe, who thinks the world owes her everything, has to see it. And so my father, who thinks he is an untouchable king, has to look in the mirror. He walked over and knelt in front of me again. Madison, I am not going to do anything without your blessing. This is our life, our marriage. But I need you to know, I am not playing games. I am not going to let them walk all over you, all over us. And I am not going to let them keep what is mine, what is time's ours. I looked into his eyes. I didn't see the quiet engineer anymore. I didn't see the sweet fiancée. I saw a wounded man determined to cut out the tumor that was poisoning his life at the root. And right beside him I saw my own reflection. I was no longer the bride trying to fit in. I wasn't Miss Practical who avoided drama. I saw a woman who had been declared a public enemy in her own home the day after her wedding. I took his face in my hands. I don't want you to destroy them, I whispered, but I want justice. I want respect. And I want our house, or whatever is left of it after they're done wrecking it. A smile of tremendous, profound relief lit up his face. That is all I needed to hear. That night, lying in the small bed of our rented apartment, holding each other in the dark, Carter whispered in my ear, "On Sunday at dinner, don't argue. Don't defend yourself. Just observe. And when they attack you, look at me. I'll handle it." "What are you going to do?" "What I should have done years ago," he replied, his voice fading into the night. "I'm going to stop being his son, and I'm going to start being your husband." Outside, the lively hum of a Saturday night in Charleston echoed through the streets. But inside those four walls we had silently drawn the front lines of a family war. And I, Madison, who only ever wanted a quiet life with the man I loved, found myself ready to fight for the very first time. Not with screaming matches, but with the most dangerous weapon my husband had just handed me, the truth. And the patience to wait for the exact right moment to pull the trigger. Sunday morning broke with a relentless sun that turned the Charleston streets into a shimmering mirage. I woke up with Carter's arm wrapped tightly around my waist in a protective grip even in his sleep. The reality of the last 48 hours dropped on me like a ton of bricks. We weren't on our honeymoon. We weren't setting up our new home. We were in a short-term rental, plotting the downfall of his family. "Are you sure you want to go?" Carter asked, adjusting his tie in the mirror of the tiny bathroom. He was wearing a crisp, light grey suit. It was his armor. "I am," I replied, brushing my hair a little harder than necessary. "But you said we were just going to listen." "We are. And we're going to do one more thing." He turned to me and I saw that strategic spark in his eyes again. "When we get there, I need you to cover for me for a few minutes. Distract Eleanor and Chloe. Do whatever it takes. Talk about the wedding, the dresses, the decor, whatever triggers them the most. Just keep their eyes on you." "Why?" I asked, a sharp prick of anxiety hitting my chest. "I need to get into my dad's home office. Just for 5 minutes." "Carter, are you out of your mind? What if you get caught? What if I get caught? I'll say I was looking for a pen. But I won't get caught. Trust me, and trust Harvey." His uncle's name hung in the air. We had met up with him the previous afternoon at a dive bar, tucked away in North Charleston. Harvey was a small man with calloused hands and suspicious eyes who smelled like stale tobacco and motor oil. There were no warm greetings. "Your dad is a thief in a tailored suit," Carter had said the moment he sat down, not even looking at his uncle. "He took over my grandfather's company, pushed you out and left me with crumbs, and he is still draining everyone's money, paying for his little princess, his vacations, his whims." Harvey had nodded, completely unfazed. "I need proof, kid. Something concrete. Invoices, wire transfers, hidden ledgers. something he can't lie his way out of. Harvey took a long pull from his beer. And what do I get out of this? Aside from him kicking me out of the LLC completely, you get justice. And if everything goes according to plan, a restructuring of the board. Maybe a rotating CEO position. Or maybe if the evidence is solid enough, you and the cousins can force a buyout and kick him out. The older man studied his nephew for a long time. You got hard, kid. I had the best teachers, Carter replied with a coldness that made me shiver. Finally, Harvey agreed. In his home office inside the desk, there is a false bottom in the second drawer on the right. The key is stashed inside that ugly blue porcelain vase that used to belong to your grandmother. He keeps copies of things in there that he doesn't even want your stepmother to see. But he's a creature of habit. He'll go to church at noon like he does every Sunday. He'll be home by 1:15 like clockwork. You'll have a window from 12:30 when the women go to the kitchen to prep until 1:10, 20 minutes. The plan was incredibly reckless. But now, walking up to my in-laws' massive estate south of Broad, wearing my most elegant sundress and a fake smile plastered on my face, I knew there was no turning back. Eleanor opened the door. She was wearing a lace apron over an expensive designer dress, a walking contradiction. Her smile was tight, the kind that never reaches the eyes. Finally, I thought you guys got lost. Her eyes quickly scanned my face, searching for signs of crying or defeat. She found none. The house smelled like bleach and roasting meat. Chloe was sprawled on the living room sofa like a princess scrolling on her phone. She didn't even sit up when we walked in. Hey, did you guys bring dessert? Mom only made pie, and I really wanted something from the French bakery. Shut it, Chloe, Arthur barked, stepping out from the hallway. He was wearing his Sunday best. His greeting to Carter was a curt nod. He didn't even look at me. Come on, the food is getting cold. The dinner was absolute torture. I could barely swallow my food. Arthur held court talking about golf politics and the economy. Eleanor kept shooting glances at Carter, waiting, I assumed, for an apology. Some gesture of submission. My husband ate politely, nodded at the appropriate times, and didn't say a single word about the house, the renovations, or our sudden move. I stuck to the script. Eleanor, this roast is incredible. Did you use a special rub? My voice sounded fake, even to my own ears. She sat up a little straighter, flattered despite herself. Just a bit of rosemary at the end. The secret is the slow sear honey. Takes time. Not like those quick microwave meals you probably make with your busy job. Oh, I know. Working at the art gallery does take up a lot of my time, I said with a sickeningly sweet smile. But Carter helps out so much around the house. He's surprisingly good in the kitchen. Chloe scoffed loudly. Carter cooking, that's hilarious. Well, yeah, Carter chimed in for the first time, his tone silky smooth. Madison is teaching me. Some of us actually have to learn how to fend for ourselves, right? An uncomfortable silence fell over the dining room. Arthur chewed aggressively. Eleanor coughed. Well then, my mother-in-law said, practically jumping out of her chair. Madison, Chloe, let's clear the table. The men can go to the patio for their bourbon. This was it. Carter shot me a lightning-fast look. I nodded, barely moving my head. Oh, let me get that, Eleanor, please, I said, pitching my voice a little higher than usual. It's my turn today. You just sit and relax. You cooked a feast. Chloe want to help me carry these plates. And then you have times to show me that new designer bag you were talking about the other day. Who was the designer again? The bait was painfully obvious, but it worked flawlessly. Chloe's eyes lit up at the opportunity to brag about her possessions. Oh, the luxury tote. It's amazing. I have it up in my room. I'll show you right now. Perfect. Let's just drop these off and go up. I stood up loudly, stacking plates. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Carter stand up too. I'm going to use the restroom real quick, he said, turning toward the interior hallway in the exact opposite direction of the guest bathroom, heading straight for the wing where his father's home office was. My heart was beating so loud I was terrified they could hear it. I ushered Chloe into the kitchen purposefully, nearly dropping a gravy boat in the process to buy time. Oh gosh, I'm so clumsy. Chloe, can you grab me a towel? She groaned, but did it. While I wiped up the mess with agonizingly slow movements, I listened. Carter's footsteps had vanished. Arthur was out on the patio lighting a cigar, his Sunday ritual. We had 20 minutes. Chloe dragged me upstairs toward her new suite. The space looked even more obscene in the daylight. A giant bed sat right in the middle of what used to be a wall, surrounded by a chaotic mess of designer shoeboxes and luxury bags. She talked non-stop about wait lists, price tags, and exclusivity. I nodded like a robot, my ear basically pressed to the open door, straining to catch any sound from downstairs. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. My anxiety was a physical knot in my throat. What if Arthur decided to go to his office early? What if Eleanor needed something from him? Suddenly, I heard a loud door slam downstairs. Then Arthur's voice, deep and furious, echoing up the stairwell. "Carter, what the hell are you doing in there?" Ice ran down my spine. Chloe, completely distracted by her open closet, didn't seem to notice. "Just looking for some old car maintenance receipts, Dad." I heard Carter's calm voice, slightly muffled by the distance. "I thought you kept them in here. The mechanic needs them. The receipts are in the filing cabinet in the garage like they always are. What is wrong with you? Do you not think?" The tone was irritated but not suspicious. At least not yet. "You're right. My bad. Got the rooms mixed up." I heard Carter's footsteps walking away, followed by Arthur's heavy boots stomping up the stairs. "Chloe, are you in there? Have you seen my silver lighter?" Chloe poked her head out into the hallway. "No, Dad, don't come in, I'm changing." Arthur grunted, his footsteps turning toward the master bedroom. I took the opening. "Gotta run down, I think I left the kitchen sink running." I blurted out, taking the stairs 2 at a time. Carter was standing in the kitchen, casually drinking a glass of water. Our eyes met. With an almost imperceptible nod of his head, he confirmed it. He got it. Half an hour later, walking briskly down the street toward our apartment, I couldn't hold it in anymore. He reached into the inside pocket of his suit jacket and pulled out a small, silver, completely ordinary-looking USB drive. Everything he said. Copies of wire transfers to accounts in the Cayman Islands. Fake corporate invoices to justify vacations and jewelry. Pages from his shadow ledger. And a few other surprises. His expression was dark, triumphant, but deeply ashamed. "It's worse than I thought, Madison. He has been bleeding the company my grandfather built dry for a decade. What about the false bottom? Did he notice anything?" "I don't think so. I put everything back exactly how it was. But it doesn't matter." He shook the flash drive. "With this, nothing else matters." Monday was a silent whirlwind. While I pretended to go to work but actually stayed in the apartment, jumping every time the phone rang, Carter executed the master plan. In the morning, David, the attorney, overnighted the certified letter to Arthur. Notice of trespass and damage to private property. 7 2-hour deadline to submit a restitution plan. At noon, Carter met with Uncle Harvey and handed him a copy of the USB drive's contents. Harvey's face, Carter told me later, was a picture of pure shock. "With this, we don't just fire him. We send him to federal prison if we want to," Times were his exact words. In the afternoon, the phone rang. Carter's cell vibrated on the coffee table. The caller ID said Times. "Dad." He looked at me, put it on speaker, and answered with a perfectly even voice. "Yes, Dad." Arthur's voice on the other end was a roar of static and fury. "What the? Is this letter? I just got you, ungrateful brat. A legal notice. To me, in my own house." "In my house," Dad Carter corrected with glacial calm. "And the letter clearly explains the issue. Unauthorized structural alterations. You have 72 hours to respond in writing, with a plan to return the property to its original state, or, alternatively, to vacate the premises." A heavy silence, thick with disbelief. Then a forced, nasty laugh. "Are you on drugs? I am not responding to this absolute joke. You are going to withdraw this lawsuit or whatever it is right now. Your mother is hysterical. I feel bad for Eleanor, but facts are facts. The house is mine. The renovations were unauthorized. The law is clear. The law. I am the law in this family." Arthur exploded. "You are going to ruin the family over a tantrum. Over that woman. I demand you come over here right now and fix this like a man." "I already gave you my answer, Dad. In writing. You have 72 hours." And he hung up. The next call came from Eleanor 5 minutes later. She was crying, screaming, talking about a mother's broken heart, about what the neighbors at the country club would say, about tarnishing your father's good name. Carter listened without flinching. Eleanor Chloe should have asked. You and Dad should have stopped her. You didn't. Now there are consequences. Consequences for your own sister, Carter. For the love of God, she is your blood. Madison is my wife, he said, and for the first time his voice cracked with real emotion and absolute unbending resolve. And she is my family now. You have 72 hours. He hung up again, powered down his phone and dropped it on the couch. Suddenly, the sheer weight of what he was doing seemed to crash down on him. He buried his face in his hands. I went to his side and wrapped my arms around him. He didn't speak. He didn't cry. He just breathed deeply, shaking slightly. The echo of the steps we had taken reverberated in the silent room. The steps into the Home Office. The steps walking out of the Trad Street house. The steps taking us away forever from the family he had always known. Tomorrow, he whispered finally, his voice rough against my shoulder. Tomorrow, when they inevitably ignore the letter, David will file the formal eviction suit for trespassing, and he will send a certified copy of my bank statements and the mortgage payments to every member of the family board, including Harvey. And then I asked, stroking his hair. Then he said, looking up. His eyes were dry and hard as stone. Then we give them the chance to surrender with dignity. And if they don't, his gaze drifted to the silver USB drive sitting on the table like an unpinned grenade. Then we take everything. Not just the house. Everything. Outside night fell over Charleston. Somewhere in the city, in a historic house full of freshly torn walls and freshly broken hearts, a countdown had begun, and we inside our little rented fortress waited. We had made our move. Now it was their turn. The game had started, and there was no turning back. The 72 hours dragged on like sand through an hourglass filled with tar. On Tuesday morning, David, the lawyer, confirmed what we already suspected. There was no response, no restitution plan, no phone call to negotiate. Just silence. A silence heavy with arrogance and the deeply rooted belief that Carter would never actually follow through on his threats. They're betting you'll back down, Carter told me, hanging up the phone. He was standing by the apartment window, hands in his pockets, watching the street. They think this is a bluff. Ah, rich kid's temper tantrum. And now I asked, setting my coffee mug on the side table. The anxiety had completely killed my appetite. Now is the next step. He turned around. He had dark circles under his eyes, but his gaze was clear and unwavering. David is filing the formal eviction lawsuit for trespassing with the county court today. Simultaneously, he is sending a certified FedEx package with all the documentation to every single board member of the family LLC. To my dad, obviously. To Uncle Harvey. To my cousins Claire and Ryan. Bank statements, mortgage payments, the property deed photos of the current state of the house, and a report from an independent structural appraiser I hired. A chill ran down my spine. An appraiser. When did you do that? He went in yesterday while they were all out at Sunday dinner. Harvey gave him the spare key. The report is devastating. Aside from the renovations being illegal, they compromised a load-bearing wall. The second floor might actually be structurally unsafe. It was a masterstroke. Utterly ruthless. He wasn't just kicking them out. He was proving with undeniable facts that his sister and parents had severely damaged his financial assets, publicly, to the whole family, and the business stuff. My voice was barely a whisper. Carter picked up the USB drive between his thumb and index finger. This I will hand-deliver to Harvey this afternoon. Only to him. With clear instructions. He will be the one who decides when and how to drop the bomb. The strategy was surgical. Isolate Arthur. Surround him. And hand a man who had harbored a 15-year grudge the exact weapon needed to take him down. I stood up and walked over to him. Are you okay? He took a deep breath. No, but I'll be worse if I don't do this. If I let them keep thinking they can step all over us, step all over our life, then I don't deserve any of it. Madison, not the house, not my name, and definitely not you. I grabbed his hand. It was ice cold. You deserve everything, and we're going to fight for it together. That afternoon, the FedEx packages went out and the silent, unstoppable earthquake began. The first phone call came from his cousin Claire, the oldest of the grandchildren, a level-headed, highly successful corporate lawyer living in New York. It rang just after dusk. "Carter, it's Claire. I just received a highly disturbing packet of documents." Her voice, always strictly professional, was tight. "Can you explain what the hell is going on? The situation with the house is unbelievable. Chloe really did that without your permission." Carter put her on speaker. "Hey, Claire." "Yeah, she did it with Uncle Arthur and Aunt Eleanor's blessing. I gave them formal written notice to rectify it. They ignored it." A heavy sigh on the other end. "Carter, this is incredibly serious. Not just family drama legally. This is a flagrant trespass. The photos. Jesus. It looks like a nightclub in there. And the appraiser's report. Is that accurate? A load-bearing wall, 100%. You can hire your own structural engineer to verify it if you want." No. I trust you and I trust the paperwork. What actually blows my mind is the other issue. The financial statements. The payments. Carter, have you really been paying the mortgage, the HOA, the taxes, everything for that house, by yourself, for 2 years? Since the day I bought it, yes. And Aunt Eleanor's trips to the Maldives last year, Chloe's new SUV. According to these attached accounting notes, those were paid out of the Southern Heritage Logistics corporate accounts. Her voice shifted from shock to pure professional horror. Out of the family business accounts. Carter closed his eyes for a second. "According to the intel I have, yes, Claire, embezzlement. Small scale but constant, spanning years. A dead silence on the line. Then a sharp thud like she had dropped a pen on her desk. Holy Carter, this is corporate fraud. This is embezzlement. I know. Do you have more proof, something conclusive?" Carter glanced at the USB drive on the table. "I might, but I'd rather not get into the details over the phone. I will just tell you that I am prepared to go all the way regarding the house. And as for the company, I will fully support whatever decision you, Ryan, and Uncle Harvey make as voting shareholders." It was a brilliant move. He wasn't making direct accusations. He was just laying the facts on the table and aligning himself with potential allies. He was giving Claire, who had always been marginalized in the family business, for being a woman, the power and the justification to strike. "I understand," Claire said, her tone completely shifting. It was now cold, calculating. The shark lawyer had entered the chat. "I am going to call Ryan and Harvey right now. This cannot be swept under the rug. The quarterly board meeting isn't until next month, but this can't wait. I'll be in touch, Carter. And I'm sorry. About the house. About everything." When she hung up, Carter exhaled loudly. One down. The next call came from Ryan half an hour later. Ryan was much blunter, not one for subtleties. "Yo, cousin. What the actual is this novel that just showed up at my house? Are you trying to blow up the family?" Carter, back on speakerphone, didn't flinch. "Hey, Ryan. No, I'm trying to enforce the law and protect my private property. What they did to my house is illegal. As for the corporate data, well, that's up to the shareholders. You own 5% right." "Yeah, a measly 5%, Ryan grumbled. "And is it true? About the vacations and the cars, Uncle Arthur always told us margins were super tight, that he couldn't raise our dividends. And meanwhile he's bankrolling island getaways with company cash. The attached bank statements and fake invoices speak for themselves, Ryan." Ryan muttered. "This is wild, man. Really wild. What are you going to do about the house? Whatever the law requires. And with the company, whatever the majority shareholders decide. I'm not on the board, so my opinion doesn't matter. But the numbers don't lie." Ryan let out a guttural sound. "All right. I'm calling Claire. We need to talk. And hey, about the house. Next time I see Chloe, I'm going to give her a piece of my mind. She crossed a massive line. Carter whispered to himself as the call ended. Night fell, and still no call came from his father, or his stepmother, or Chloe. It was a deafening silence loaded with fury and denial. They were still betting it was a bluff. The next day, Wednesday, Harvey called. His voice sounded strange, a mix of thrill and terror. "I have it," he said without any preamble. "I went through the flash drive. It's even worse than I thought. There are wire transfers to an offshore account in the Caymans, under a shell company. The dates line up perfectly with when he bought the beach condo. It is absolutely bulletproof." "What are you going to do?" Carter asked. "Claire and Ryan are already on board. They saw the hard copies you sent. They are livid. I just called an emergency shareholder meeting for tomorrow, 11 a.m. at Claire's office. Your dad doesn't know yet." Carter nodded even though Harvey couldn't see him. "This is going to blow up, Uncle Harvey. It's going to get ugly." "It was already ugly, kid. Only now the collateral damage is going to hit the person it's supposed to hit." Harvey paused for a long time. "Your stepmom is never going to forgive you for this." The sentence hung in the air like a blade. Carter paled slightly, but his voice didn't waver. "She didn't forgive me for marrying Madison. She didn't forgive me for putting the house in my name. She didn't forgive me for being born if we really want to go there. I have nothing left to lose." A heavy sigh. "All right, kid. Tomorrow at 11. I'll keep you posted. And you, watch your back. Your dad isn't going to just sit there and take this when he finds out." Harvey's warning proved to be prophetic. At 7 p.m. the doorbell of our apartment rang. Sharp, urgent, aggressive knocking. Carter and I looked at each other. We weren't expecting anyone. I peeked through the peephole and my heart stopped. It was Arthur. Alone. His normally tanned face was a dangerous purplish red. "Don't open it," Carter whispered, stepping closer. "I know you're in there, Carter. Open this damn door." Arthur's fist slammed against the wood, rattling the frame. "Open it, or I'll kick it down." Carter sighed in resignation. He took a deep breath and, with a terrifying calmness, unlocked the deadbolt. He opened the door, but only a few inches, blocking the entrance with his body. "Dad." Arthur looked like he was about to have a heart attack. His bloodshot eyes searched past Carter, locking onto mine, with a hatred that made me instinctively step back. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" He spit the words out. "A FedEx package. To the family. To my business partners. An eviction notice." "You had 72 hours to respond to the initial legal notice," Carter said, his voice steady. "You didn't. I proceeded according to the law." "The law? I am the law in this family. I don't give a damn about your paperwork," he screamed, his breath reeking of bourbon and rage. "You are going to withdraw all of this right now. You are going to call that pencil-pushing lawyer and stop this insanity." "No." The simple, clear word seemed to suck the air right out of Arthur's lungs. He blinked, like he didn't understand the language. "Excuse me." I said. "No, Dad. I am not withdrawing anything. The lawsuit moves forward, and tomorrow at the shareholder meeting the real business of the company will be discussed." Arthur's face went from red to an ashen, sickly gray. A slow, terrible realization dawned in his eyes. "Harvey, the emergency meeting. They knew. You." His voice dropped to a toxic hiss. You miserable traitor. You teamed up with my brother with that bitter little man. You handed over confidential intel to the partners. I facilitated information to the shareholders, as is their legal right. You have been stealing from them for years, treating my grandfather's company like your personal piggy bank. It was for the family, Arthur roared. But the roar sounded fake now. Desperate. Everything I did was for this family, to give you a good life, to give your sister a good life. My good life, Carter's composure finally shattered. It was a contained explosion, sharp as cracking ice. The good life of growing up hearing I was never enough, that I needed to be more like you, that my biological mother was weak and stupid for leaving everything to me. You paid off your beach house, Chloe's designer whims, your gold watches with everyone else's money. And then you have the audacity to come into my house, try to kick me out and humiliate my wife. Carter took a step forward, forcing his father to back up into the hallway. "It's over. The house is mine. You will restore it to exactly how it was. And as for the company that gets handled tomorrow, now if you don't turn around and leave right now, I am calling the cops for making threats and attempting to force entry." Arthur stared at him like he was a total stranger. Like the docile, obedient son he had raised had shapeshifted into a monster right in front of him. The mask of the untouchable patriarch cracked, revealing just for a second an old, terrified and furious man. "You are going to regret this for the rest of your life," he muttered, his voice dripping with venom. "You are going to end up completely alone. No family, no nothing." "I have my wife Carter," replied without blinking, "and I have a clear conscience, which is more than you will ever be able to say." Slowly, deliberately, he shut the door right in his father's face. He turned the deadbolt. A few weak thuds hit the door, then stopped. Heavy, stumbling footsteps echoed down the stairwell, fading away. Carter leaned back against the door, facing away from me. A deep, violent tremor ran through his body. He let out a dry, gasping sob, but no tears fell. I went to him and wrapped my arms around him tightly. No words were needed. He had crossed the point of no return. He had challenged the king in his own castle, and the wounded king was retreating to lick his wounds before the final battle. The next day, at exactly 11:05 a.m., Carter's phone rang. It was Harvey. His voice on the other end was trembling with contained adrenaline. "It's done," he said. "Meeting just adjourned. Your dad is out. Unanimous vote. Claire Ryan and I laid out the evidence." He couldn't say a damn word. He just stood up and walked out without looking at anyone. "Who's taking over?" Carter asked, his voice hoarse. "Rotating CEO. 1 year each, starting with me. We agreed to bring in an external auditor, and we are going to dock the embezzled funds directly from his equity in the company." "Right." There was a pause. "Carter. He said he doesn't have a son anymore. He said he's erasing you from his life." Carter closed his eyes. "I know. Your stepmom called Claire, hysterically crying, saying you are a monster, that you destroyed the family." "The family was already destroyed, Uncle Harvey. I just took the blindfolds off." Harvey sighed. "Yeah. Well, as for the other thing, is the house. Between the lawsuit and this, I don't think they're going to put up much of a fight. They're going to need cash for defense lawyers, and with Arthur cut off from the company accounts, they'll figure it out," Carter said and hung up. He collapsed onto the couch. The phone rang again, this time relentlessly. It was Eleanor. Then Chloe. Then an unknown number, probably some distant cousin calling to yell at him. Carter powered the phone off. The silence in the apartment was absolute. The air felt heavy. We had won. We had taken back the family business. We had exposed Arthur. We had launched the legal nuke to get our house back. We had won. So why didn't we feel happy? Why did we only feel this massive, crushing emptiness? This freezing cold that spread from our chests down to our fingertips? Carter looked at me, and in his eyes I saw the exact same pain, the exact same grief. He had cut out the tumor, yes, but the surgery had been brutal, and the scar it left behind was going to be massive and ugly forever. "Now," he said, his voice barely. A whisper comes the crying, the begging, but it's family guilt trips. "Now comes the hard part, Madison." Holding the line, I curled up next to him, resting my head on his shoulder. Outside, the bright Charleston sun beat down on the city with relentless joy. Inside our little rented fortress, we had won a battle. But the war for our peace, for a future without ghosts, had just begun, and all the cannons were now pointing directly at us. Victory tasted like ash. In the heavy silence of our small apartment, with Carter's phone powered down on the table like a diffused bomb, there were no celebratory hugs, no toasts, no relief, just a profound, bone-deep exhaustion. Carter sat frozen on the sofa, staring blankly at the wall. He didn't cry. He seemed to have burned through every tear he had. I stayed curled up beside him, and we sat there as the afternoon sun faded into dusk. "He said he doesn't have a son anymore." Harvey's words echoed in the room louder than any scream. Carter wasn't a overly sentimental guy, but his father's shadow, as tyrannical as it was, had been his compass. A broken compass, sure, but a constant one. Tearing him down had cost Carter a piece of his own soul. "What do we do now?" I finally asked, my voice scratchy from disuse. He blinked like he was waking up from a trance. "We wait. The eviction lawsuit is processing. David will handle it. We." He made a vague gesture with his hand. "We live. Tomorrow, you go back to the gallery. I'll try to work from here." Live. It felt like a bizarre concept. Like everything that happened before that Sunday at the Trad Street house belonged to another lifetime, to another person. The next day, I tried to follow his advice. I went to the art gallery where I worked as an assistant. The outside world, with its bright lights and indifferent noise, felt completely surreal. I answered phones. I organized shipping crates. I smiled at clients. I was a robot. My boss, Lucy, a sharp 60-year-old woman with hawk-like eyes, called me into her office mid-morning. "Madison, honey, sit down." Her tone was unusually soft. "Do you want to tell me what's going on? You've been on another planet all week, and today you look like a ghost." The genuine compassion in her voice was the straw that broke the camel's back. I broke down. Not a polite, elegant cry. An ugly, convulsing, chest-heaving sob. I told her almost everything between hiccups. The house, the entitlement, the humiliation, the Cold War, the family board meeting. I didn't get into the nitty-gritty of the embezzlement, but I told her about the eviction and the absolute severing of his family. Lucy listened without interrupting, pushing a box of tissues across her desk. When I finished, she sighed. Family. A literal nest of vipers sometimes. "Look, kid, I'm giving you the week. No, 2 weeks. Paid. Go home. Go to your times, real times, home that apartment, and be with your husband. This is way more important than hanging canvas. Call me if you need anything." Gratitude choked me. I nodded, unable to speak. Stepping out of the gallery, the Charleston sun hit my face, and for the first time in days it didn't burn. I took a deep breath. There was still kindness in the world, just not inside the walls of my ruined dream house. When I got to the apartment, Carter wasn't there. A note on the counter, written in his neat handwriting, read Times, went to see David at the law firm. Back soon. I love you. I made a cup of tea and sat in the living room trying to ignore the silence. That's when the knock came. Soft, timid, nothing like Arthur's furious pounding. My heart seized. I checked the peephole. It was them, Eleanor and Chloe. My mother-in-law's face was puffy and pale, her eyes red. She looked like she had aged 10 years in 3 days. Chloe stood next to her, looking hollowed out. No makeup, wearing sweatpants and a hoodie, a far cry from the smug goddess who had claimed our home. She was carrying a small duffel bag. Panic flared. I almost didn't open it. I wanted to pretend I wasn't home, but then I saw Carter's face in my mind. His unbending resolve. We weren't the ones hiding anymore. We held the keys. I opened the door just a crack, keeping my body blocking the frame. "Madison, sweetheart." Eleanor started, her voice breaking on a sob. She pressed a tissue to her eyes. "Please, let us in. For the love of God, we need to talk." Chloe didn't say a word. She stared at the floor, arms crossed like a scolded child. "Carter isn't here," I said, holding my ground. "It's you we want to see," Madison Eleanor begged. Her tears looked real, the kind of tears that leave tracks in your makeup. "Please, just 5 minutes. I'm begging you. I'm begging you." That pierced me. This was the woman who had looked at me like dirt on her shoe, who had enabled and cheered on the hostile takeover of my home. But right à rank, she was just a terrified, broken mother. Against my better judgment, against the plan to hold the line, I stepped back. 5 minutes. They walked in. Eleanor looked around the tiny living room with a look of such profound pity it was actually insulting. Chloe collapsed into a dining chair, looking entirely drained. "Coffee, water?" I asked on autopilot, moving toward the kitchenette. "No, nothing, honey. Please sit." Eleanor perched on the edge of the sofa, like she was afraid of catching a disease from the upholstery. I sat across from them in the armchair. The battlefield was set. Eleanor took a deep breath, clasping her hands together like she was praying. "Madison, we came to apologize." The words clearly tasted like ash, but she forced them out. The house was a mistake. A massive mistake. I don't know what we were thinking. Chloe got overly excited, and Arthur and I, instead of stopping her, we encouraged it. It was madness. Chloe looked up at me. For the first time, there was no arrogance in her eyes. Just a deep, primal fear. "I didn't mean to hurt you, Madison," she mumbled. "I swear. It's just. I've always lived there. And when Carter said you guys were moving in, I thought it would just be like before. That it would be my house, too." I got carried away. I was being selfish. It was the apology I had been craving for days. But hearing it now from their mouths, it sounded hollow, calculated. Too little, too late. "It was incredibly painful," I said, choosing my words carefully. My voice sounded cold, distant even to me. "Not just what you did, but how you did it. The absolute contempt." "It wasn't contempt," Eleanor gasped, then quickly lowered her voice. "It was clumsy. It was a terrible lack of sensitivity. We see that now. But honey, this can be fixed. The contractors can come back. They can frame up the wall, leave it exactly how it was. We'll buy you all new furniture, whatever you want." "It isn't about furniture, Eleanor," I said, feeling the rage I had suppressed starting to boil in my gut again. "It's about you walking into my home, your son's home, and destroying it on a whim without even asking. It's about you standing in front of my husband and telling me that Chloe had more of a right to be there than I did. It is about basic respect, and you can't buy that at a furniture store." Eleanor went even paler. Fresh tears spilled over. "You're right. You are completely right. We acted like savages. Arthur is beside himself. The board, they kicked him out of the company, his own father's company. Do you realize that he is destroyed?" There it was, the real reason for the visit. It was never about the house. It was about the business, the power, the money. "What happened with the company was a decision made by the shareholders," I said, reciting the exact phrasing Carter and I had agreed on. "Over internal matters we have no part in." Eleanor sat up straight, and for a second, the desperate mother vanished, replaced by a furious woman. "Carter gave them files. Private files. He betrayed his own father." "Eleanor," I said, keeping my composure with superhuman effort, "Carter provided financial records to the other owners of the LLC. Whatever they chose to do with that information is no longer our business." "Of course it's your business, your family," she screamed, then slapped a hand over her mouth like she was trying to shove the words back in. She lowered her voice into a venomous, pleading whisper. "Look, Madison, I get that you're angry. You have every right to be. But this is entirely different. This is destroying the family, your Times family. Do you really want to be known as the woman who split the family in half? The daughter-in-law everyone whispers about at the country club, the one who ruined everything." It was a low, dirty blow, and it hit me right in the chest. She was weaponizing my desire to belong, my fear of being the outsider. I took a deep breath, picturing Carter's face, his iron determination. "I am not going to be the woman who let her in-laws steal her home and humiliate her husband," I replied, my voice steady. "Whatever happens with the company and with Arthur is a direct consequence of his own actions, not ours." Chloe, who had been dead silent, suddenly shot up. Her fear seemed to have mutated into something sharper. Desperation. "What do you want me to do, Madison? You want me on my knees? Fine. I'll do it." And to my absolute horror, she slid off the chair and dropped to her knees on the hardwood floor. "Forgive me. Forgive us. Tell Carter to stop this. To pull the lawsuit. My dad can't take this. He's going to die." "Do you want him to die?" Madison, Chloe shrieked, actually crying now, snot and tears running down her face. "Get up, Chloe," I said, frozen in place. "This was a grotesque performance. This has nothing to do with—" "It has everything to do with it," she wailed. "Without the company, we have no money. Without the house, we have nowhere to live. You're putting us on the street. Is that what you want to see us begging?" "You have a job," I snapped, unable to hold it in anymore. "Your parents have savings. They have the beach house. You aren't going to starve. The beach house is mortgaged to the roof. Eleanor blurted out. She instantly bit her lip, realizing she had just given up information she definitely shouldn't have. Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Of course, the luxury vacations, the cars, the lifestyle, it was all financed by stolen corporate funds and massive debt. They were drowning. That is no longer my problem, I said, standing up. The interview was over. I had seen exactly what I needed to see. The fear, the manipulation, the panic. But no genuine remorse, just terror at facing the consequences. Carter and I have made our decision. The eviction lawsuit moves forward. You need to vacate the property and restore it to its original condition. That is the law. Eleanor stood up too. Her tears vanished, leaving behind a trail of impotent rage. You are nothing but greedy vultures. My son has turned into a stranger, and you brainwashed him. You married into this family just to tear it apart. I left your family the day you made it perfectly clear I would never be a part of it, I replied, opening the front door. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have things to do. Chloe scrambled up from the floor, humiliated and furious. You are going to regret this, Madison. I swear to God. Do not make threats in my home, Chloe, I said, with a glacial calmness I didn't even know I possessed. It's incredibly bad manners. Eleanor stormed out, followed by a sobbing Chloe, who shot me one last look of pure, concentrated hatred. I slammed the door, leaned against it, and started shaking violently. Adrenaline pumped through my veins like battery acid. I did it. I held the line. I didn't cave. When Carter got home an hour later, I was still shaking. I gave him a word-for-word recap. He listened with a dark expression, then pulled me into a crushing hug. You handled it perfectly, he murmured into my hair. The beach house being mortgaged. That explains everything. They've been living on borrowed time in every sense of the word. So what happens now? I asked, burying my face in his chest. Now, he sighed, comes the hardest part. Because they won't surrender. My dad doesn't know the meaning of the word, and my mum will fight with the only weapons she has left: guilt, emotional blackmail. Chloe dropping to her knees, he made a face of pure disgust. Cheap theater, but effective. They are going to try to make us feel like the bad guys. Try to make us doubt ourselves. And will we? The question slipped out as a whisper. Carter pulled back slightly to look me in the eyes. His eyes were exhausted, filled with a bottomless sorrow, but there was zero hesitation in them. I will. I'll feel like a monster on plenty of nights. But then I'll remember the way they looked at you. The things they said to you, what they did to my mother's memory, treating her inheritance like their personal slush fund. And I know we can't back down. For us. For the future we want to build. A future that isn't built on lies and other people's bones. That night, trying to fall asleep in the small rental bed, Carter's phone buzzed. He had turned it back on. It was an unknown number. He let it ring. A few minutes later, a voicemail notification popped up. With trembling fingers, he put it on speaker. It was Arthur's voice. But not the roaring, furious voice from the night before. It was a broken, raspy voice. The voice of a defeated old man. Carter, son, please talk to me. Let's just talk. No lawyers, no lawsuits. Just father and son. I've made mistakes. Huge mistakes. But your sister, your mother, they don't deserve this. Please, call me. The message ended with a sharp intake of breath, a choked-back sob, and then silence. Carter powered off the phone. In the dark, I watched him press the heel of his hand against his eyes. A violent shudder ran through his body. This time the shot hit a critical artery. This wasn't the wrath of the patriarch. This was the desperate plea of a father. And it was 1,000 times more dangerous. I moved closer and held him tight as if I could shield him from the echo. I didn't say anything. There were no words for that kind of grief. I could only lay there with him in the trenches of this dirty war, reminding him silently of what we were fighting for a home that was actually ours, for a respect we didn't have to beg for the right to say times no times without the entire world collapsing around us. The tears, just as he had predicted, finally came. But they weren't the tears of surrender his family was hoping for. They were the bitter, necessary tears of a man burying a ghost so he could finally start living. Arthur's voicemail lingered in the dark corners of the bedroom long after the audio ended. Carter didn't delete it. He didn't play it again either. He just placed the phone face down on the nightstand like it was a radioactive object and turned his back to it, seeking my warmth in the narrow bed. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. I could feel the tension radiating from every muscle in his body, the internal war between the wounded son and the man who refused to be a victim anymore. By the next morning, that emotional storm had crystallized into a chilling, silent resolve. As I made coffee, Carter was already dressed, sitting at the small dining table, typing furiously on his laptop. "What are you doing?" I asked, sliding a mug in front of him. "Emailing David, instructing him to expedite the eviction process and to file an additional claim for damages and emotional distress on top of the restitution." He didn't look up from the screen. His profile was locked in a hard, chiseled line. "If they want a war, it's going to be a blitzkrieg. I am not letting this drag out for months." "And your dad's voicemail?" He finally looked up. His eyes were like flint. "That message was for the son I used to be, Madison. That guy's dead. They killed him last Sunday when they looked at you like you were a squatter in your own house. I am not negotiating with a ghost." His coldness terrified me, but it also anchored me. He was the rock I had to cling to in this hurricane. I nodded. Okay. David's strategy to expedite the process was as brutal as it was effective. By mid-morning, the lawyer called to confirm that, leveraging the formal admission of our lawsuit, he had requested an emergency injunction, a pre-judgment freeze on Arthur and Eleanor's personal bank accounts, specifically the accounts linked to the Trad Street HOA and utility payments, arguing the funds were needed to guarantee the restitution construction costs. He also formally notified the property management company and the neighborhood HOA of the ongoing legal dispute, making it clear that any liabilities stemming from the unauthorized renovations would fall entirely on the current occupant. It was a devastating 1-2 punch choke off their cash flow and publicly expose them to their wealthy social circle. The shockwave must have hit them like a missile. At 2:00 p.m., the doorbell of our apartment rang again. This time the knocks were sharp, authoritative, not Eleanor's timid tapping. I checked the peephole. It was Arthur, alone, but he wasn't the unhinged screaming man from a few nights ago. He was clean-shaven, wearing a crisp button-down and a sports coat. He looked like the old Arthur, the untouchable CEO except for the sickly pallor beneath his tan and the deep purple bags under his eyes. There was no begging in his expression. There was only a suppressed, icy fury. It was far more dangerous than his yelling. "Don't open it," Carter said from behind me. He had seen the camera feed on his phone. He stepped up to the door. "What do you want, Arthur?" Arthur's voice was deep and terrifyingly controlled. Not a trace of the broken man from the voicemail. "Open the door. I want to talk. Negotiate. Man to man. Enough with the lawyers and the cease and desists." Carter hesitated for a fraction of a second. Then, motioning for me to step back, he unlocked the door. He didn't open it wide. He blocked the frame exactly like last time. "Speak." Arthur didn't try to push his way in. He just looked his son up and down like he was sizing up a stranger. "You've grown, Carter. Or shrunk. I can't tell which." "What is your offer?" Carter asked, ignoring the jab. "I'll drop the fight. I'll pay for the damages. A reasonable amount. And we leave you the house. Chloe will move out." It was essentially exactly what we had demanded, but coming from his mouth it sounded like a trap. In exchange for what Carter asked without blinking, Arthur flashed a bitter, humorless smile. "In exchange for you withdrawing your accusations with the board, you step back. You tell them it was a misunderstanding, that those financial records were taken out of context. Harvey and the rest will listen to you. You're the aggrieved son. If you forgive me, they'll sweep it under the rug." There was the real price tag. He didn't care about the house. He cared about his title, his honor, his pristine country club facade. He wanted Carter to be his alibi, to save his neck in exchange for returning property that already legally belonged to us. It was a cynical, desperate, and incredibly revealing trade. Carter stared right through him. And the embezzled funds, the Maldives trips, the Cayman Island accounts. A nervous tick flared in Arthur's jaw. That is my business. I will pay it back quietly over time. No, Carter said with absolute stillness. I am not lying for you. I am not laundering your reputation. You stole from your family, from your brother, from your nephews. You lied. The consequences are yours to bear. Arthur's mask of control shattered. You're my family too. Do you really think you're going to walk away from this clean? Everyone knows it was you who leaked the files. You're a rat. You're disloyal. I'd rather be a disloyal son with a clean conscience than a thieving patriarch. Carter fired back, his voice dripping with disgust for the first time. Here is the counter-offer. You vacate the house before the end of the month. You pay for the restoration out of pocket. And at the LLC you take whatever punishment the board hands down. That is the only negotiation on the table. Arthur went dead pale. His breathing grew heavy. You have no idea who you're messing with, boy. I built an empire from nothing. You destroyed your father's empire from the inside, Carter corrected. And now it's over. You have 24 hours to give David a written response agreeing to a mutual move-out. If you don't, the bank account freeze goes into effect tomorrow morning. The eviction suit goes public. And you will deal with the scandal in court with the HOA and with all your buddies at the club. Make your choice. For a split second, I genuinely thought Arthur was going to lunge at his son. His fists clenched the veins in his neck, bulging like rope. But then, something shifted in his eyes. The raw rage morphed into something much more calculating. Cunning. It was the look of a poker player who had one last ace hidden up his sleeve. 24 hours, he repeated, his voice eerily calm. Fine, but I want to speak to Madison. Just for a minute. Alone. The pivot was so sudden it knocked the wind out of me. Carter instantly went on the defensive. No, absolutely not. I have something to tell her, Arthur said, his eyes locking onto mine over Carter's shoulder, cold as steel. Something you haven't told her. Or maybe something you don't even know, he smirked. Are you really that scared to let me talk to your wife, son? It was a cheap taunt, but it worked. Carter looked back at me, hesitating. I took a deep breath. I didn't want to talk to this man. The thought made my stomach churn. But the curiosity was a hook I couldn't ignore. What could he possibly say that we didn't already know? It's fine, I said before Carter could shut the door. My voice sounded much stronger than I felt. 5 minutes. Right here in the hallway. Carter looked panicked. I gave him a tiny, reassuring nod. Trust me. Reluctantly, Carter stepped out into the hallway, pulling our apartment door shut behind him, but he stayed just 2 feet away, arms crossed, hovering like a lethal bodyguard. Arthur and I were left alone in the tight space of the stairwell landing. The smell of his cheap cologne and stale smoke was suffocating. What do you want? I asked, keeping my distance. He took a step closer, dropping his voice to a conspiratorial, venomous whisper. I just want you to know who you really married, little girl. My son is not the white knight you think he is. He has his own dirty secrets. I have zero interest in your lies, I said, turning to go back inside. Do you know why he rushed to marry you so fast? The question stopped me dead in my tracks. Do you know why he insisted on buying that house in cash right before the wedding? I turned back around slowly. Because we love each other. And we wanted to start our life together. Arthur let out a dry, nasty laugh. How naive. He did it to protect himself, to launder his mother's inheritance money before the bomb went off. He knew Madison. He knew about the company discrepancies for months. And instead of coming to me, his own father, to help fix it, he started moving his chess pieces. He bought the house under his name. He latched onto you, a nice girl with 0 family complications and a steady job, to build a flawless facade of normalcy, to have a protected asset when my life blew up. Doesn't it strike you as a little odd that he had this rental apartment booked weeks times in advance? The words fell like throwing knives hunting for a weak spot in my armor. He was trying to plant a seed of doubt, to poison the only solid ground Carter and I had left our trust. You're lying, I said, but my voice trembled. I ask him about the private forensic auditor he hired out of New York last September. Ask him how much he paid them. Ask him if that wasn't the exact moment he realized he needed to build a firewall between himself and the family. His smirk was a portrait of wicked triumph. The wedding to you was the perfect alibi. Let's start a new life far away from the drama. Do you really think it was a coincidence that all of this went down the day after the honeymoon he planned it? He let Chloe make a fool of herself. He let us take the bait so he would have the ultimate moral high ground to strike, so he could play the victim when in reality he is the biggest predator of us all. He used you, Madison. You are just his perfect alibi, the offended wife that gives him the moral justification to destroy his family and walk away with the cash. I felt violently dizzy. I didn't want to believe him. I knew Arthur was a master manipulator, but some of the puzzle pieces fit perfectly. Carter's premeditated calmness, the pre-booked apartment, his encyclopedic knowledge of the family's shadow finances. "Are you done?" I managed to say, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Leave." Arthur took a step back, thoroughly satisfied. He had planted the bomb. That was all he came to do. "Think about it," he whispered. "And when you do ask yourself why your husband never shed a tear for his family, because he seems so cold, doesn't he? Maybe the real monster isn't standing out here in the hallway. Maybe he's the one you sleep next to." He turned on his heel and walked briskly down the stairs. Carter, who had heard the muffled tone but not the exact words, immediately shoved the door open. His face was a mask of sheer panic and rage. "What did he say to you, Madison? Whatever it was, it's a lie. It's his last resort. Divide and conquer." I stepped back inside the apartment, shaking. "Did you hire a private auditor from New York last September?" The question hit him like a physical blow. He blinked. The silence stretched for 1 second too long. "What?" "In September. A forensic accounting firm from New York to investigate your dad's LLC. Yes or no?" Carter closed his eyes like a sudden blinding pain had spiked through his skull. When he opened them, I saw the agonizing truth. Yes. The floor seemed to vanish beneath my feet. And the wedding. The apartment. "Madison, listen to me." He stepped toward me, but I took a giant step back. "Yes, I started getting suspicious over a year ago. The numbers weren't making sense. I hired a private auditor I went to college with. In September, I got the hard proof. It was devastating, and I knew that the second it came out, it would be all-out war. That is exactly why I rushed to buy the house. I wanted us to have something solid, something legally ours far out of reach from the blast radius. That is why I pushed to move the wedding up." His voice cracked raw and desperate. "Because I loved you. My God, I love you. But also because I wanted to lock in something good, something clean with you, before everything went to hell. The rental apartment was a contingency plan, just in case it all blew up early and we needed a safe house, but I never used you, Madison. Never. I love you. This," he gestured wildly at the tiny, chaotic room. "This is the nightmare I was trying to avoid. This wasn't the plan." His words were frantic, honest. I could see it in his eyes, hear it in the raw panic in his throat. But the shadow of doubt, so expertly planted by Arthur, was already twisting in my brain. Was this all part of a cold, calculated master plan? Or were these just the desperate, messy decisions of a man trapped in a toxic bloodline trying to build a raft for the woman he loved before the ship sank? I need air," I mumbled, grabbing my purse from the counter. "Madison, please. Don't." It was a plea, a cry. "I need to think. Just let me be alone. Please." I practically ran out into the hallway, sprinting down the stairs and bursting out onto the blindingly bright Charleston street. I walked aimlessly, my heart hammering in my ears. Every mask had fallen. Arthur, the broken patriarch. Carter, the loyal son. And now, maybe even my own husband, the ruthless strategist. Who could I trust? Which truth was the real one? Arthur hadn't come to negotiate for a house. He came to detonate a bomb inside the only bunker we had left. And God help me, it felt like it worked. I walked for blocks, the echo of Arthur's accusations and Carter's confession clashing in my head like discordant church bells. The afternoon sun, which usually felt so warm now, felt violent, glaring off the cobblestones and blinding me. I ducked into the first shady refuge I saw, Street Phillips Church, a towering historic sanctuary tucked off the main road. The air inside was cool, still smelling of old wood and centuries of quiet prayers. I sat in a dark pew near the back, far away from a couple of tourists whispering near the altar. He used me. The question twisted like a knife in my gut. Was it all a setup? The wedding? The house? The love? I closed my eyes and forced myself to bypass the cold, hard facts Arthur had weaponized and focus on the memories. The night Carter asked me to marry him. It hadn't been some cinematic, over-the-top, perfectly staged proposal. It happened in his cramped kitchen. His hands were covered in grease because he had just spent an hour fixing the leaky pipe under my sink. We were eating takeout. He had been quiet, more serious than usual. Suddenly he put his fork down. "Madison, I want you to marry me times," he had said, no frills, looking me dead in the eye. "I don't want to wait anymore. I don't want to spend another day of my life without you officially being my family. My only real family." At the time, I chalked it up to a sudden wave of romance. But now, in the harsh light of his confession, the words meant something entirely different. My only real family. He was already cutting them out in his mind. He was already building his bunker, and he wanted me to be the cornerstone. I thought about the day he showed me the Trad Street house. It's a steel Madison, and it's independent. It's ours, where nobody can tell us what to do. His eyes had sparkled, but I had also felt this strange urgency, an almost desperate need to close the deal quickly. I, blindly in love and obsessed with the architecture, had assumed it was just excitement. Now I knew it was panic. It was a shield. It was such a dangerously fine line. Was it love, or was it a meat shield? But could someone fake the way he looked at me when we woke up? The infinite patience he had when I had a panic attack before dinner with his parents, the late nights whispering about our dreams, opening a gallery together, traveling to Japan, was all of that just a script? Then a cold, crystal-clear realization hit me. If this had all been a perfectly calculated, selfish master plan, why rent the backup apartment at all? For times, us times, if his only goal was to use me as a legal alibi and dump me when the dust settled, he wouldn't have bothered securing a safe house for both of us. He would have just protected himself. And more importantly, he wouldn't have fought like a rabid dog when his family humiliated me. If I was just a pawn, he could have feigned anger, waited until I wasn't around, and quietly bent to their demands. Instead, he declared thermonuclear war on his own blood. For me. For us. Arthur was a master manipulator. He had taken half-truths, the auditor, the rushed timeline, and wrapped them in the most venomous lie possible, that his son's love was fake, because Arthur knew that was the only thing that could actually break me. Divide and conquer. The oldest trick in the book. I let out a long, shaky exhale that echoed into the vaulted ceiling of the empty church. The quiet of the sanctuary finally settled the hurricane in my mind. I shook my head, violently rejecting the poison my father-in-law had tried to inject into my veins. No, I wouldn't believe him. I would believe the man who burned his own legacy to the ground to give me a safe place to sleep. I would trust my own gut, which was screaming at me that Carter's love was real. It may have been forged in the middle of a chaotic, toxic nightmare. It may have been accelerated by circumstance. But it was real. Just as real as the tears I had felt shaking in his chest. I stood up. I had to get back. We had a war to finish. When I opened the door to the apartment, Carter was standing in the exact same spot in the middle of the living room, frozen. His face was pale, completely hollowed out by fear. When he saw me, a visible tremor rocked his body. He didn't speak. He just waited for the executioner's axe to fall. I closed the door behind me, took off my jacket, and hung it up with a calmness I didn't entirely feel. Then I walked up to him, the auditor, the rush to get married, The secret apartment, I started. I saw him squeeze his eyes shut, bracing for the hit. It was a really thing to keep that from me. He nodded, not opening his eyes. I know. I am so sorry. I was going to tell you when the dust settled, but your dad lied about the most important part, I interrupted, taking a deep breath. You didn't use me. You took refuge in me. There is a massive difference, and I am choosing to believe in that difference. Carter's eyes snapped open. The relief in them was so profound, so utterly devastating, that the tears he had been holding back for a week finally broke. He dropped to his knees right in front of me, burying his face in my stomach. His shoulders heaved with ragged, tearing sobs. I ran my fingers through his hair, looking out the window as the sky began to turn a deep, bruised orange. We had survived the ultimate test, the sabotage from within. No more secrets, he whispered, his voice muffled against my shirt. I swear to God, Madison. Never again. Never again, I confirmed. Now, stand up. We have an ultimatum to deliver. He stood up, wiped his face with his sleeve, and nodded. The vulnerability vanished, instantly replaced by that terrifying, steel-eyed resolve. You're right. The 24 hours are almost up, and David hasn't heard from them. Do you want to go down to his office? For the surrender, Carter said. He walked into the bedroom and came back out holding 2 thick manila envelopes. David and I drafted this up last night after you went to sleep. It's the final settlement. Everything we are demanding. Point by point. Ready to sign. If they refuse, the negotiations end. We let the courts obliterate them. I opened the flap and pulled out the document. It was exhaustive, brutal, implacable. 1. Immediate eviction from the Trad Street property within a maximum of 30 days. 2. Full restitution of the property to its original architectural state, strictly matching county blueprints funded entirely by Arthur. An independent inspector chosen by us would oversee the construction. 3. Payment of a massive financial penalty for property depreciation, unauthorized use, and emotional distress. The number printed made me physically gasp. 4. A signed binding waiver renouncing any future claims to the property or to Carter's inheritance. 5. A strict no-contact order. No member of the family, Arthur, Eleanor, or Chloe, could attempt to contact us directly or indirectly under penalty of immediate harassment charges. It was severe. It was definitive. It was in legal terms a total divorce from his family. And if they don't sign, I asked, then tomorrow morning David executes the emergency freeze on their bank accounts. They lose all liquidity. The eviction suit goes public, dragging their name through the mud for months, but ultimately they will lose. By signing this, they save themselves the public humiliation of a trial, and they buy themselves 30 days to find a new place to live. Do you really think they'll sign? Carter shook his head. My dad never. But my stepmom, once she sees the financial penalty and realizes her bank accounts are about to be frozen, she will force him to sign it. To save Chloe, to salvage whatever dignity they have left. When are we supposed to do this? At David's office, 7 o'clock tonight. I already set it up. They've been summoned. I looked at my watch. It was already 5:30. You set this up without asking me. I'm sorry. I did it while you were out walking. David called me and said they had reached out asking if there was room for dialogue. David told them the only dialogue left was a signature on a settlement. Against all odds, they agreed to show up. I guess the threat of frozen accounts did the trick. An hour and a half later, we walked into David Sterling's sleek, ultra-modern law office in downtown Charleston. David was a lean, sharp-featured man with thin wire glasses who rarely smiled. He greeted us with a curt nod. They're in the conference room. I kept them waiting. I wanted a word with you first. He ushered us into his private office. The tension in there is thick, he said bluntly. The mother has been crying. The father looks like he's carved out of ice. The daughter looks catatonic. I placed the settlement agreements on the table 10 minutes ago. They haven't made a peep. He turned to Carter. Are you absolutely sure you don't want to include a non-disclosure agreement to prevent them from talking about this at their country club? No, Carter said flatly. Let them talk. The truth is already on the table. We have nothing to hide. David nodded. Understood. Let's go. The conference room was a stark, white space, dominated by a massive glass table. On the far side, they sat. Arthur sat rigidly, staring straight ahead at the blank wall. Eleanor was twisting a shredded tissue in her hands, her eyes swollen and red. Chloe looked pale as a ghost, staring blankly at her reflection in the glass table. Right in front of them sat the two thick copies of the settlement agreement. We sat down on the opposite side. David took the head of the table. A heavy, suffocating silence filled the room. You could feel the gravity of it pressing against your chest. Eleanor was the first to speak. Her voice was a tiny, broken whisper directed at Carter, though she couldn't meet his eyes. Carter, this is cruel. 30 days. Where are we supposed to go? Carter didn't answer. He just looked at David. The lawyer cleared his throat. Mrs. Heritage, the agreement is final. The terms are non-negotiable. Do you accept them or not? If the answer is no tomorrow morning, we move forward with the pre-judgment attachments on your accounts. It's an outrage. Arthur exploded, slamming his fist onto the glass table. The water glasses jumped. This is robbery. You are robbing us blind. No, Mr. Heritage, David replied with chilling patience. According to the evidence currently in the possession of the Southern Heritage Logistics Board of Directors, the only person who has been robbing anyone is you. This, he tapped the settlement, is an incredibly generous out-of-court offer. It saves you an ugly public eviction trial, a much larger lawsuit for corporate damages, and the absolute public ruin of your reputation in this city. Arthur turned ghost white. The mention of the LLC sucked the air right out of the room. Eleanor let out a stifled sob. Dad, Chloe mumbled. It was the first time I'd heard her speak. She sounded terrified. The real, primal fear of someone watching the floor collapse beneath them. Dad, we can't. We don't have the money to fight this. Shut up, Arthur snapped, but there was no power behind it. His hate-filled gaze locked onto Carter. Are you happy? Did you get what you wanted? Are you going to enjoy watching us get thrown out on the street? Carter finally spoke. His voice was steady, devoid of anger or triumph. It was just filled with infinite exhaustion. No, I'm not going to enjoy it. It's going to hurt me every single day for the rest of my life. But it's the kind of hurt you feel when you cut out a cancer, Dad. It hurts, but you have to do it to survive. You chose to steal your family's future. I am choosing to protect mine. These are the consequences. I gave you life, Arthur roared, shooting up from his chair. David raised a warning hand, but Carter didn't even flinch, and with it a suffocating weight of expectations, lies, and disrespect. Carter shot back smoothly. Enough. Sign the paper. You have a month to start over, debt-free from me. Refuse to sign, and I guarantee you won't have a single dollar available in your checking account by noon tomorrow, and every single person in Charleston will know exactly why. Make a choice. The final battle waged in Arthur's eyes. I watched the fury, the disbelief, and the impotent rage cycle through him, and finally, the bitter, total surrender. He collapsed back into his leather chair. He wasn't the powerful CEO anymore. He was just an exhausted, defeated old man who had been stripped of every weapon he owned. It was Eleanor who took the reins with a sudden, unexpected dignity. And my daughter. What happens to Chloe? Chloe is 28 years old, Eleanor Carter said, and for a split second I heard a trace of real pity in his voice. She has a college degree. She can get a job. She can figure out how to survive, just like everybody else does. Just like I did when you threw me out of the house at 19 because I wanted to study engineering instead of joining your country club business. Chloe dropped her head in shame. Eleanor stared at the settlement. Then she looked at her husband, who seemed to have physically shrunk in his chair. With a trembling hand, she picked up the heavy silver pen David had laid out. I'm signing it, she said. Eleanor, no, Arthur growled. Shut up, Arthur, she screamed back with a ferocity that made all of us jump. Tears of pure grief and rage streamed down her face. Enough, you gambled with everything. With the money, with the company, with our daughter's future. And you lost. Sign the damn paper, so we can wake up from this nightmare. Arthur stared at her. and in his eyes I saw something I had never seen before: fear. Fear of her. The woman he had dominated his entire life. Without another word, he snatched the second pen. With a violent, almost illegible scrawl, he slammed his signature onto both copies of the agreement. David gathered the documents, inspected them, and nodded. "It is formalized. I will overnight the countersigned copies to your residence tomorrow. Your 30-day window begins at midnight tonight. The structural inspector, Mr. Henderson, will contact you to schedule his walkthroughs and coordinate the rebuild. Have a good evening." It was the ultimate dismissal, both literally and legally. Arthur stood up and marched out of the room without looking back. Eleanor lingered for a moment, looking at Carter. She opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come. Finally, a tiny whisper escaped. "Goodbye, Carter." He gave a single stiff nod, unable to speak. Chloe was the last to walk out. She stopped in the doorway and looked directly at me. The hatred and arrogance were completely gone. In their place was just a massive, hollow emptiness, a silent, terrifying question times. What now? Then she turned and followed her parents out. When the heavy glass door clicked shut, the silence in the room was absolute. Carter slumped back into his chair, exhaling a breath he looked like he'd been holding in for 20 years. I walked over and put my hand on his shoulder. He was shaking. "It's over," I whispered. "No," he said, staring at the empty doorway. "It's never over. This is just how it is from now on." We walked out of the law firm into the golden, fading Charleston light. On the street, life continued, loud, happy, and completely indifferent. We walked in silence, holding hands like two shipwreck survivors who had just washed up on a desolate beach. We had won the house back. We had won the war. We had built boundaries made of solid steel, but looking at the profile of my husband weighed down by a victory that tasted so much like defeat, I knew he was right. It wasn't over. We had cut out the tumor, but the scar was going to be wide and deep, a permanent reminder of the ultimate price of freedom. But as I squeezed his hand, intertwining my fingers with his, I knew it was a price I was willing to pay. Because finally, the future in front of us, even if we were sitting in a cheap rental apartment with broken hearts, was ours alone. And in that moment, that was the only treasure that mattered. The month that followed the signing of the settlement felt like a slow bleed. A tense electric calm settled over our lives. Carter worked from the apartment, glued to his laptop, with a ferocious focus, as if writing lines of code could erase the memory of David Sterling's conference room. I went back to the gallery, where Lucy greeted me with a silent hug, and double the workload, the perfect distraction, to keep me from thinking too much. We held up our end of the bargain to the letter. David sent the finalized paperwork. The independent inspector, Mr. Henderson, a man of few words who always had a tape measure clipped to his belt, met with Arthur at the Trad Street house to assess the damage. We didn't go. Carter handed the inspector a copy of the original blueprints and gave him carte blanche. "I don't even want to look at it until it's exactly the way it was," he told me. The subtle heartbreak in his voice crushed me. News trickled back to us, slowly filtered through David or the inspector. Arthur had hired the cheapest, sketchiest contractors he could find. Eleanor had been admitted to the ER with a severe panic attack, and Chloe, according to the neighborhood gossip mill, had quit her job at the high-end boutique and spent her days locked inside what was supposed to be her mega suite. We didn't call. We didn't answer the few attempts they made to reach out. A text from an unknown number, times Carter. "It's Mom. Please." Deleted unread. A bouquet of wilted flowers left outside our apartment building, thrown directly into the dumpster. The no-contact clause wasn't just a legal threat. It was our armor. Until one Friday afternoon, 3 weeks after the settlement, the armor cracked. I was walking home from the gallery, my arms full of art catalogs. As I turned the corner onto Queen Street, I saw a familiar, hunched figure leaning against the brick wall of our building. It wasn't Arthur, or Eleanor, or Chloe. It was Uncle Harvey. He looked even smaller and more weathered than the last time I saw him, as if the stress of being the new acting CEO of the logistics company was physically shrinking him. He was wearing the same worn-out sports coat. When he saw me, he stood up straighter, looking uncomfortable. "Madison." "Hey." His voice was gravelly. "Harvey. What are you doing here? I wasn't rude, but I didn't drop my guard. My instincts were permanently on high alert now. I need to talk to Carter, both of you. His shrewd, tired eyes scanned my face. It's not about the business. It's something else. The no-contact agreement doesn't apply to me, he interrupted, a flash of his old gruffness returning. And I'm not here to ask for favors for them. I'm here to warn you. The word times, warn times, hung heavily in the humid Charleston air. I looked up at the windows of our apartment. Carter was up there, totally oblivious. I took a deep breath. Come on up. When I unlocked the door, Carter was sitting in the living room. Seeing his uncle, he jumped to his feet, a mix of alarm and annoyance flashing across his face. Uncle Harvey, what's wrong? Shut the door, kid, Harvey said, walking in and dropping onto the small armchair without waiting for an invitation. He looked exhausted. I have bad news. Carter looked at me, searching for an explanation. I just shook my head. We sat down on the sofa across from him. Your dad, Harvey, started pulling out a pack of cigarettes before remembering where he was and shoving it back in his pocket. He's completely finished. The audit, it uncovered a much bigger hole than we thought. It wasn't just skimming off the top for vacations. It was massive structural embezzlement. Claire and Ryan are seeing red. They are talking about taking it to the district attorney if he doesn't pay back every single cent. Carter turned pale. And he doesn't have a dime, Carter. The beach house is leveraged to the roof. His bank accounts, the ones David didn't freeze, are totally overdrawn. Literally. The only thing of value he has access to right now is the house on Trad Street. The air in the room grew thick. It's my house, Carter corrected, though his voice lacked its usual bite. Yeah, and he is destroying it even more. Harvey looked back and forth between us. Those cheap contractors he hired, total hacks. Henderson, your inspector, called me yesterday, freaking out. He said instead of properly reinforcing the load-bearing wall, they did a shoddy patch job that weakened it further. They also managed to screw up the electrical wiring for the downstairs unit. The HOA is talking about suing the property owner. Meaning you, Carter. A fist of ice clenched in my stomach. Carter dragged his hands down his face. Son of a... That's not even the worst part, Harvey continued, delivering the intel with the bluntness of a war correspondent. Eleanor is doing really bad. She won't leave the house. Chloe is a total wreck. And Arthur... Harvey paused carefully, choosing his words. Arthur is not accepting defeat. He is desperate. And a desperate, proud man is capable of anything. What are you talking about? Uncle Harvey Carter leaned forward. Harvey lowered his voice. I overheard a conversation. Yesterday at my usual bar over in North Charleston, Arthur was sitting in a booth with a very shady guy. A loan shark. Goes by the name Vince. You know the type. They were talking about an insurance guarantee. I couldn't hear the rest, but I didn't like the sound of it, kid. Not one bit. A freezing silence flooded the room. Vince was notorious in the area. A guy known for extremely violent collection methods. The word insurance, in that context, usually meant one thing: an arson policy, or something worse. Do you think he'd actually burn the house down? My voice was barely a whisper. I don't know, Harvey said, standing up. His mission, it seemed, was complete. All I know is that he is cornered, broke, and consumed by a hatred for you two that is eating him alive. That house is a liability now, Carter, not an asset. For him, and maybe for you. He walked to the door but stopped and turned around one last time. Carter, sell that house, right now, before it's too late. It's a tumor. Cut it out for good. When the door clicked shut behind him, the apartment felt suffocatingly small. Carter and I looked at each other. In his eyes I saw my own terror reflected back at me. But for the first time in weeks, I also saw a spark of absolute clarity. He's right, Carter said slowly. That house is never going to be our home. It is infected with their poison. Their screaming matches their lies. And now their botched construction jobs and potential felonies. So what do we do, I asked, even though I already knew the answer. We sell it, he declared. It looked like 100-pound weight had just been lifted off his chest. We sell it as is, with the structural damage. with the terrible wiring to an investor, a flipper, whoever makes the first cash offer, and with that money, we leave. I finished his sentence. Far away from here. Once the decision was made, we moved with frantic, blinding speed. The next morning, Carter called David, not to enforce the settlement, but to modify it. He instructed the lawyer to contact Arthur with a brand new deal. We would withdraw the eviction lawsuit and drop all claims for financial damages. In exchange, they would sign off on the immediate sale of the house to a cash buyer of our choosing, formally waiving any and all rights to the property. The proceeds of the sale would be used to pay off the HOA fines and the neighbors' electrical damages. Whatever was left, if anything, they could keep. It was essentially a pardon, a surrender on our end. But it was also the only logical escape hatch. David, the cold-blooded legal shark, objected immediately. You are giving away your legal rights. From a financial standpoint, this is idiotic. It's not about finances, David. It's about survival. Carter cut him off. According to David, Arthur's reaction on the phone was total silence, followed by a gruff "Times. Send me the paperwork." Eleanor, listening in on the call, broke down crying and yelled, "Times, yes, yes, to whatever it is, please." The sale closed in record time. A local real estate developer who specialized in gutting and flipping historic downtown homes made a lowball cash offer. Considering the structural nightmare, it was a joke of a price, but we took it. We signed the closing documents in David's office. Arthur signed his portion with a different notary across town. We didn't have to see them. The house on Trad Street was no longer ours, and it was no longer theirs. It became a tracking number in a county registry. Someone else's problem. The day the final deed was recorded, Carter and I packed our bags. We didn't have much, just the essentials. We left the IKEA furniture in the rental apartment. We packed a few boxes into a storage unit. We didn't know exactly where we were going or for how long. We just knew we needed to put 1,000 miles between us and Charleston, between us and the Heritage family, between us and the poisoned memories. The afternoon before we left, we received one last unexpected visitor in the most unlikely of places, White Point Garden, the beautiful park down by the Battery. We were sitting on a bench under the massive oak trees watching the sailboats out on the water, not saying a word, just existing together in a space that finally didn't belong to anyone else. Then we saw her. Eleanor was walking alone along the oyster shell path, moving slowly like her bones were made of lead. She was wearing a heavy black cardigan, way too thick for the muggy weather. She saw us. She stopped. She hesitated. Then, with visible agonizing effort, she walked toward us. Carter went completely rigid beside me. I grabbed his hand and squeezed it tight. She stopped a few feet away. She didn't try to sit down. Her face was a mask of grief, carrying a strange, fragile, new dignity. "Harvey told me you were leaving," she said. Her voice was just a raspy whisper. Carter nodded. He didn't speak. She looked down at the dirt path, then at me, and finally back at her stepson. In her eyes there was no manipulation, no blackmail. Just a sadness so vast and dark, it was almost too painful to look at. "I came to say goodbye. For real this time. And to give you this." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small yellowed envelope sealed with red wax. She held it out toward Carter. He didn't take it. "What is that?" "It's from your mother," Eleanor said, a violent tremor, shaking her hand. "From your biological mother. She gave it to me years ago when she was very sick. She told me, 'Give this to him when he becomes a man, and when he finds someone to truly love. Not before.'" A single silent tear rolled down Eleanor's cheek. "I think now is the time." With a shaking hand, Carter reached out and took the envelope. He didn't open it. He just pressed it flat against his chest. Eleanor took a step back. "I wish you both luck. Truly, you are strong. Much stronger than we ever were." She paused, swallowing hard. "Forgive me for everything. Especially you, Madison." And before either of us could respond, she turned around and walked away, blending into the tourists strolling along the waterfront, a solitary figure in black, carrying away the very last shreds of a world that no longer existed. Carter and I stayed on the bench as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the harbor in shades of gold and violet. He held his mother's letter tightly in one hand. I held his other hand in mine. We didn't need to open the envelope right then to know what was inside. It wasn't a secret bank account or a hidden deed. It was a blessing, a symbolic key to open the door we had finally decided to walk through together. Early the next morning, we loaded our suitcases into the trunk of the car. We had a piece of paper with an address scribbled on it. New York for now, maybe somewhere else later. The engine purred to life. Carter looked up into the rearview mirror at the Queen Street apartment at the historic city slowly waking up around us. "Ready?" he asked. I smiled. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, it was a real smile, blooming from a quiet, safe place deep inside my chest. "Ready." He shifted into drive and we pulled away. We didn't look back. Ahead of us, the highway stretched out endless and full of possibilities. Behind us was the house of screaming matches, the demolished walls, the ghosts of a family that chose their own pride over love. But inside the car, with our wounds still fresh but finally clean, with the wax-sealed envelope resting in the glove compartment and our hands tightly laced together over the center console, we had the only thing that actually mattered: each other and the open road. We had lost a house, but we had finally found our home. And it was a home with no walls, no addresses, and no locks. It only had our two names written on it. Not on a property deed, but in the quiet air between us, in our shared silence, in the promise of a tomorrow that at long last belonged only to us.